Dear Dr. Majumdar, sir, I must confess that I used to think that you are a Bengali who came to Pune to do some business in education. And when I saw the name of Vidyaji, I thought that probably she has been married into a Maharashtrian family. Only very recently I realized that you are a proper Maharashtrian. You did not come here to do any business, but you are on a very big transformative agenda. My great tributes to you for the great work that you are doing. All the distinguished scholars and elders on the dais and off the dais, and my dear young friends. At the outset, let me thank Vidyaji for stating very candidly that she wanted to pull these things out of Delhi. There are many things that need to be taken out of Delhi, out of the South Block and North Block, but also out of the TV studios in Delhi. They need to be taken into the hinterland, needed to be placed in proper perspective before the people. And diplomacy, international relations, these are generally seen as the domain of the elite, not for the ordinary folks like me. But I really congratulate the courage of the Symbiosis International University for inviting me to have a commoner's perspective of this very important subject. I mean, it is sometimes said that it is diplomacy is too serious a topic to be left exclusively to the diplomats. Nevertheless, I respect all the diplomats present on the dais and off the dais. It needed to be discussed at a broader level, and I am happy that this conference will serve that purpose. This is an academic institution, and I am sure you must have heard about the statement of the English statesman Lord Palmerston, who said that there are no permanent friends or allies in diplomacy. There are only permanent interests of the nations. Henry Kissinger took it one step forward. He said, it's not just about friends. There are no permanent foes either. It's only permanent interests that guide nations in their diplomacy. No, it's okay to say that friends can increase, there can be more new friends, but to say that no permanent enemies is a very important statement. It implies that foreign policy is a dynamic subject. There's no place for romanticism in it. I sometimes jocularly say diplomats don't laugh. They're supposed to be cold-blooded. They're supposed to be pragmatic. Diplomacy has to be, international relations have to be guided by utter pragmatism. Unfortunately, we in India, we have great vanity for romantic slogans. When the post-independent India, when we found the world to be divided into two blocks, one block led by the USA, the other block led by the USSR. We found a romantic idea in creating what we called as non-aligned countries group. Not realizing we are creating a third block. The idea was to remain non-aligned. But what ultimately happened was we created another third block. Romanticism has guided us in the initial years of our foreign policy and our diplomacy. There are senior diplomats who may argue that all those things have helped us. People like us who study these things from a very academic or very purely commoner's perspective may find a lot of what I should say, lot of failures in those slogans. But the tragedy remains. We are very fond of these slogans even now. I was at the Shangri-La Dialogue recently. Ash Carter was giving a speech after our defense minister, Manohar Parrikar, spoke, and after Mr. Parrikar, Ash Carter, the American Secretary of Defense, spoke. He said that, there is an emergence of an inclusive, principled security network that represents the next wave of Asia-Pacific security. Now, this statement sounded very beautiful. He was talking about a principled security network. So it was immediately lapped up by some of our scholars. And one scholar, in that very conference, he stood up and said, Mr. Carter, this principled security network idea, off the record he said it, that you are talking about, India is not going to be a participant. It is going to lead this network. No, gentlemen, we have not stood up and asked him, what principle are you talking about? What is that principle on which this network will be formed? Today, Carter is no more. No more means he is alive. His government is not there. Ash Carter is gone. With him is gone this so-called principled, security network. Friends, why I am saying this is, this romanticism with words, with phrases, is not what we want. We still celebrate the non-aligned movement in India. Okay, as a history, you can teach it. You still have Commonwealth leader summits happening, where there is nothing common in the nations. You still have a Commonwealth nations leaders meetings taking place, and as a ritual, you have to follow that. 21st century, friends, has put an end to many 20th century institutional frameworks. This is going to be a new diplomacy now. NAM, Commonwealth, they are history now. European Union is imploding. Long live European Union, but we don't know when will it collapse. And the final rights of NATO, the famous America-led security alliance, will be written by Trump and Putin together very soon. Institutional networks are changing. You are living in a totally different 21st century. Here I appreciate Symbiosis University has picked on the right subject, the Indian Ocean, the most happening place in the world. Global power axis, friends, has today moved away from Pacific Atlantic, where it used to be some 15 years ago, 20 years ago. It has moved to Indo-Pacific region. Today, this region is going to be the global powerhouse for next several decades to come. I can substantiate my statement with data. Ambassador Amar Sin has talked about certain significant aspects of Indian Ocean region. 40% of the world trade today passes through this region. 50% of the energy trading happens in this region. This region is home to 50% of the global energy resources. Somebody said in 10 years from now, half the world's submarines would be roaming around in this region. Half the warships, half the military aircraft will be flying over this region. This region is trade-wise, economy-wise, natural resources-wise, and strategy-wise a most important region in the world today. Asia has today emerged as the global epicenter. It's not the US, not Europe, it's going to be Asia. The new 21st century alliances will be Asia-driven. Only alliance that President Obama wanted to create in this region was TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. Not really involving any major powers in our region, in the Indian Ocean region, but some peripheral powers like Australia, New Zealand, Japan. But even that effort by America, an alliance to be led by America, today seems to be in tatters. It was signed by 12 or 13 countries in February at Brisbane. And it could not be ratified by the American Congress until now. And Trump, during his election campaign, has clearly said that I am not going to ratify TPP. With the TPP's demise, in fact, I was at the Halifax International Security Forum. Harry Harris, the celebrated PASCOM commander, he said openly that TPP is more or less dead. That means you are entering into a region where the entire power equations will be led by powers in the region. And I am here to state that three powers are going to lead the future power equations in this region. One is India, one is China, and the third is going to be the US. China is today, economically, and in terms of its military muscle, seems to be far ahead of us. It is in the driver's seat of many new 21st century alliances today. Whether it is AIIB, or RCEP, or Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or even BRICS, where we are there. It's aggressively pursuing some of its infrastructure projects like Belt and Road, its Maritime Silk Route. It has built a formidable navy in no time. I would say in just 20 years, with more than 300 small and big vessels in its navy, in a position to challenge the most powerful naval powers in the world like USA, UK, and France. Now the role of America under President-elect Trump, when he becomes president on the 20th of January next year, remains very uncertain. Where will it go? Four factors influence this region. What will Trump do with Russia? What will Trump do with China? What will Trump do with Saudi Arabia? And finally, what will Trump do with India? These four factors, the answers to which are not there with any strategic thinkers in this audience or outside, because the most unpredictable president. So the region's future is going to throw up many challenges for us, friends. Coming to India, let me just say a few words and conclude. We have great ambitions today. We are no longer a reticent nation of the past. When it comes to international relations, we are very hyphenated, very reticent, very, withdrawing. But that is the past. Today we are no longer a reticent nation. We have ambition, we have the courage to express that ambition publicly. Prime Minister Modi went to USA in 2014. And the statement he made there in his meeting with President Obama was that India has ambition to rise as an influential and responsible global power. Nothing short of it. 21st century India has to rise as a global power. An influential global power, but also a responsible global power. This is what we said. So we have ambitions. Without causing any disequilibrium, we have to pursue a path that catapults us to this level of global leadership. I suggest that one of the major transformative measures that India has to pursue is to first of all change this nomenclature of Asia Pacific. Ambassador Sinha has talked about Indo-Pacific. It's not in vogue still. People still call this region Asia Pacific. And I heard a new statement from Commander Harris. He said, Indo-Asia Pacific. We have to start calling it the Indo-Pacific region by establishing the centrality of Indian Ocean to the global politics today. This is on the agenda of our strategy thinkers, our government today. We have to make Indian Ocean, we have to establish the centrality of Indian Ocean to the global power politics. We have started many initiatives. Ambassador Sinha has referred to some of them. The idea is for India to engage, India to establish greater engagement in the region. As he rightly said, Prime Minister has visited smallest of the small countries. Where he could not go, he collected those countries at one place. I was privy to a conference at Fiji, where all the 12 South Pacific Island nations were, the heads of the 12 South Pacific Island nations were invited. Prime Minister Modi was to address them. We had only one lingering doubt. Prime Minister Modi was to go on so-and-so date. One day before that, President Xi Jinping also planned a visit. They also called the leaders of South Pacific Island nations. So our challenge at that time given by the Mandarins in Foreign Ministry was to ensure that we will have at least one head extra. Meaning, if China gets 9 fellows, we should get 10. Otherwise it's a failure. But between us, we jocularly said, we started with a very distinct advantage. Remember, India enjoys distinct advantages in many areas. The distinct advantage there was, out of these 12 South Pacific Island nations, 5 have recognized Taiwan. So obviously, China had only 7 countries to invite, and we had 10. We engaged. We got into competition, but that is how the future is going to be. We have to have greater engagement with ASEAN. We have to get out of this hyphenation business. If I go with so-and-so country, what will so-and-so country think? I was one day in Taipei. One very respected ambassador was there at that time. They are not called ambassadors. When they are sent to Taipei, Taiwan, they are called trade representatives, because we don't have diplomatic ties. When I spoke to him about India-Taiwan relations, all the time he was talking about how China will react. So I told him, sir, you are not in Beijing, you are in Taipei. How China will react will be the problem of that person sitting in Beijing. Or tomorrow you are transferred there, that will be your problem. But today you bother about it, because we got used to so much of this hyphenated politics. If we do this, how will China react? If we do that, how will Pakistan react? Prime Minister Modi is the first leader who said, Nothing doing with hyphenation. We have dehyphenated our international diplomacy. We deal with America, we deal with Russia, we deal with China on equal footing. This is the kind of politics we have to pursue. Hyphenate, bilateralism in a multilateral world. Friends, the road is going to be full of challenges. I am sure next 2 days we will discuss about the challenges also. It's very easy to talk about opportunities. The Indian Navy requires huge facelift. Prime Minister Modi has given a plan, but by 2030, India also should have at least 200 vessels in its navy. Long way to go. I'm talking about 2030. I'm telling today, the Chinese have more than 300 vessels. And those who command the seas command the world today. You need to strengthen Indian Navy. Technology, cyber and digital technology is going to play a very big role. Age of conventional wars is over. It's going to be technological wars. You have seen what is happening, what is the discussion happening in America today. Who defeated Hillary? Not Trump, but Putin. That's the whole discourse. Technology defeats you. Your digital, your cyber. India has great demographic dividend in the form of youngsters. India has to harness it. India has to progress in its defense technologies. It has to develop newer technologies. I can tell you, with fair amount of knowledge, China is far ahead of us in that also today. So these challenges are going to be very severe if we were to really play that role of leaders in the region, friends. One last thing, for this to happen, we need out-of-the-box thinking. We need people who think unromantic way. I give a very unpalatable example, how it should be. Under One Belt, One Road, China is building a road from its western territories to Gwadar port. We have been opposing it. We have been opposing it on the premise that it passes through a disputed territory, namely Gilgit-Baltistan, GB. It's Indian territory occupied by Pakistan. The road that China is building, it passes through the disputed territory. So we are protesting. We have been protesting for the last 15 years. The road is more or less complete now. I propose, suppose we tell the Chinese side, since this territory belongs to me, I also have to be made a stakeholder in this. I am a party. If it can be a China-Pakistan enterprise, why can't it be a China-Pakistan-India enterprise? Now today, one may laugh at me, but tomorrow is full of opportunities. Unfortunately, strategic issues are not discussed in detail in public, but it can get us huge strategic dividend. I'm saying we need to think on those innovative, out-of-the-box ways for India to progress. India has all the qualifications, all the potential, the right leadership today. What we need is right ideas. I hope this conference gives us those right ideas. Thank you.